Welcome into Furtado and Seymour. I'm Jake Seymour, and joined alongside me is Noah Furtado and Ryan Sikora. A lot of stuff going on across the sports world, NBA, NFL. Seems like it's the gift that keeps on giving. Hecticness going around across both leagues. But let's just kick it right off with the NBA. No need to settle into it. Kevin Durant started it off with a bang on free agency, requesting a trade out of Brooklyn. And I think my initial reaction with this at first was, where can he go? And then Woj kind of put the pieces together for us, right? He said Phoenix Suns and the Miami Heat were his preferred destinations coming out of Brooklyn. However, Kevin Durant, and this is why it's different than any other superstar that's been traded throughout the NBA in the last 2 to 3 seasons, Kevin Durant has 4 years left on his deal. He doesn't have a no-trade clause. He doesn't have a 2-year, so he's not a rental. So it really makes it all 29 teams outside of Brooklyn should be putting their name in the hat for Kevin Durant. And you got to think, Brooklyn's going to be taking whatever pick, whatever package is best value to them, not what's best for Kevin Durant.
Yeah, that's the point. It's regardless of where his preferred landing spots were, it's pretty irrelevant. I mean, you'd think that Brooklyn would not entirely disregard sort of his wishes, but at the same time, they don't necessarily have a loyalty to him. He certainly didn't. And I think one thing that he needs to keep in mind, like in this situation, is just that not every team that he may want to go to has what it takes, has all of the sort of resources to put towards a trade that's going to land him, especially after the trade that we saw with Minnesota and Utah that put so much in Rudy Gobert's basket. So that really set the market for at least what Brooklyn is now going to be looking for, considering the gap between Kevin Durant and Rudy Gobert, because it's clear that they're not the same players. Kevin Durant is a lot more valuable. And in the Nets' mind, they're going to be looking for a leg, hand, and head in this next trade if they end up getting it done. I feel like because of how much they're looking for, you saw a couple of reports that kind of make it seem like they're going to want a huge piece at the very least from whatever team they're trading with, as well as a ton of picks. It's possible that this thing doesn't go through and Durant will just have to suck it up in Brooklyn for maybe another year or two until they can really get someone that's going to really give up what they're looking for.
I think honestly, right, you look at the Gobert trade, and again, we're talking about that when we're talking about KD because that's the big superstar that just got traded. So in the same offseason, right, Rudy Gobert getting traded before Kevin Durant, who wants to be traded, he sets the market for any big-time trade that's going to happen. And the haul that the Timberwolves had to give Danny Ainge and Utah was massive. And I think the really thing you want to focus on with that Gobert and Utah trade and Minnesota and Utah trade is that the guy who made the trade is Danny Ainge, a guy who has a history of figuring out how to get pretty nice hauls for pretty solid superstars. You go back to when he got the job in Boston and he hired Brad Stevens, gave him a long contract, new coach. I think Brian Windhorst talked about this, right? They gave Brad Stevens a super long contract and they went and traded all these guys. And they went and traded KG and they went and traded Rondo and they got rid of everybody and said, okay, Brad, I'm giving you a long-term deal because I trust you, even though I'm giving you nothing to start. He wants all those picks. And I think Danny Ainge wasn't going to settle for anything less. And when you're a guy like Danny Ainge and you have the allure when it comes to not settling in trades like that, Minnesota was always going to overpay to go get Gobert because Gobert, at the end of the day, he frees up Karl Anthony Towns, their best player. He allows Karl Anthony Towns to go be a power forward, a forward that he wants to be and not this kind of half center, this 4.5 type player. Now he's a pure 4. Because Gobert is at the rim 24/7. So I don't think you can really compare what Gobert gave the Jazz in terms of the trade, the number of picks back and the personnel, and of course, Patrick Beverley. But I think that's what everyone's going to gravitate to. I don't know if KD is going to go for that much. I think Rudy Gobert might be worth more in this year's – he's not worth more. I think he might go for more than what KD wants to go for. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that KD wants to leave, and everybody knows that. Like, everybody knows that Katie wants to leave, and he's not going to play for the Nets this year if they don't trade him, and they're not going to get anything out of this season if they don't trade him. So people are going to lowball it, right? I mean, that's how I see it. I don't think Kevin Durant's going to end up going for as much as you'd think he would, seeing what Gobert went for. Like seeing Gobert go for 4.5, 5 picks, and then 27,000 players, half the league got traded for Rudy Gobert. You'd think, oh my God, KD's going to go for 10 players, a whole roster, and then like 6 firsts. It's just not going to happen. It's just, I think his numbers will be comparable to what the Timberwolves had to give up to get Gobert.
It's just hard to imagine a trade that's going to be larger in picks and players and money than that Rudy Gobert trade. It's impossible, right? And any team that would, especially if you look at Kevin Durant, the age that he's at, again, it's a 4-year contract, but he's up there in age. He's getting towards the end of his prime. And who knows, maybe he can pull LeBron and be great until he's 37. But as of right now, we don't know that. And it's hard to really pinpoint for anybody to say that, right? But I think one of the interesting kind of reports that came out or opinions that came out is Kendrick Perkins had mentioned on ESPN how Kevin Durant may have just requested a trade to help his buddy Kyrie get the contract, hoping that the Nets can kind of push him in a direction where Kyrie can get his payday. However, and I think it was more so just an opinion that Perk stated on the air, but you got to think Perkins is a guy who's connected with the league. He has his sources, and he's well around. He has sources. He knows the guys to talk to, right?
He's also
it also is Perk, right? So you got to take it with a grain of salt, of course, right? But it did kind of get my ears up perked a little bit, and I said, wouldn't it be interesting if KD's requesting the trade and we hear Brooklyn saying, I think the Suns offered DeAndre Ayton, Mikal, and a couple picks, and they said no. Wouldn't it be something for Brooklyn to leak out these reports saying that Kevin Durant isn't going anywhere near close to the offers they've received, for them for KD just say, yeah, well, I just want to get my buddy extended, and that was the whole point of requesting this trade. I mean, that would be something.
I think that's huge speculation. I don't. I mean, there might be some reason to it, and that's why it's something to chew on. But at the end of the day, I don't think Durant wants to stay in Brooklyn. I think that whole situation blew up when James Harden left, because it's crazy because a year ago they were at least my favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference and compete for the NBA Finals. They were that talented, and those 3 players meshed so well, it seemed at first, and it was hard to sort of track what deteriorated so quickly to have their relationships, and maybe not their relationships, but just their buy-in to the situation there, like in the blink of an eye, really. And one thing I wanted to note too is that Durant, regardless of where he sort of wants to go, he still needs to understand that, considering how much Brooklyn's asking for him, like let's just take what the reports say for face value at first. Let's take what Brooklyn's saying, what they're asking for, right, and just run with that. If that's how much they're looking for, he will potentially be in a worse situation anywhere else than Brooklyn because of how much that potential team would have had to give up for him. You know what I mean? Because they're not just asking for draft picks, they're asking for key pieces. Now, this is just a recent report that specifies one specific team that is sort of in trade talks, or that was in conversation with Brooklyn. But the Timberwolves, they were asked reportedly for Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, and 4 draft picks. That is absolutely ridiculous. Why would Durant want to go to Minnesota without Towns, Edwards, 4 draft picks? Who else would be there? Russell?
Rudy Gobert.
D'Angelo Russell, Rudy Gobert, man. Yeah, so I just think that I think it could fizzle out, honestly, because if I'm understanding Brooklyn correctly, and I'm not trying to speculate into, they're just kind of, they're setting the bar really high. I think they're actually wanting that much because of how much they saw Gobert go for. And regardless of the whole league, I understand what you're saying, Ryan, with that, how the whole league kind of knows he wants out. And so they're going to sort of lessen how much they give up because they know Brooklyn is going to want to move him. But he also has a no trade clause, and however many years on his contract, or he doesn't have a no trade clause. And however many years on his contract still, and so he's really in a stuck position there in Brooklyn, and they hold the cards, at least contractually in this whole craziness going on. So,
and I think the thing with Brooklyn too is that you got to remember is that Brooklyn doesn't want to be burnt like they were back in 2013 when Pierce and Garnett were sent there in the exchange for all those draft picks, which became your Jaylen Browns and your Jason Tatum's in Boston, right? And I part of me says that the Nets are aware and conscious of that decision and saying to themselves, we don't want to be put into that position where we ship off Kevin Durant and we get these first round picks back and realize that this team is really good for a long time and these first round picks are in the 20s and maybe even pick number 30. And I could totally see Brooklyn just really taking their time with this and really making sure that the picks that they get are going to be valued not only now, but in 5 years from now when those picks actually start hitting and they start getting those players in the draft. Because the last thing you want to do if you're that team is ship off your superstar and then all of a sudden have these picks that are supposed to be these lottery picks hit in the low teens, early 20s. Because what are you going to do there? You can't do anything there. What are you going to hit on?
Well, so what you could see is they could play the long game, and you could see a whole bunch of picks that are coming in 2027, 2028, 2029, the picks that Sam Presti loves to trade for, right? The picks that Sam Presti's going, all right, well, some eighth grader right now is going to be really good in 5 years, so I want that pick, right? You could see a lot of those picks come, and it could be Kevin Durant is traded to the Phoenix Suns for Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, Cam Johnson, and Cam Payne, plus a 2027, 2028, 2029, and 2031 first rounder, and then maybe like a couple of seconds or maybe even a couple of firsts immediately, right? So that's how you're going to be able to rack up picks in this, is because Brooklyn's going to be aware, like you said, and they're going to be like, I don't want to be picking. I don't want the Suns pick when they're losing in the Western Conference Finals, because all that does is it adds me a G League guy for a year, and then if our talent development is really good, we get a really good bench option for the next 2 years, and then maybe we develop a Pascal Siakam. You know what I mean? If that, but you're not likely to do that. You're not likely to get someone who's an elite contributor right away in those late picks. So maybe what you could see is them say, yeah, you can have KD. We want all these guys to help us now, and we want all these picks to help us 4 or 5 years down the road when KD's gone and you guys have overspent on salary and you guys suck. And then our picks are going to be in top 10 and top 14 and lottery picks, right? I think that's something that not enough teams do in the NBA, and enough teams do it to where it's a viable option to see it. But I think that's something that if Brooklyn makes a trade, you could totally see something like that, right? Like, okay, yeah, we're going to give you all these players that are going to contribute off your bench and be solid guys for the next 3 seasons before they hit their second contract. But then all these picks we're going to give you, as soon as these guys are hitting their second contract and you don't want to pay them anymore, all these picks are going to start to come in, and then you get replacements for these rookies that are leaving, and all these picks are going to come in and replace those guys.
I think I want to, what you're saying is very valuable just for the fact that we don't know what we're expecting from Kevin Durant in this season, but even more so in the future, right? And we kind of touched on that earlier. But one of the points I want to highlight on, you mentioned Sam Presti and how he's gathered around all these first-round picks, and he's kind of looking for, the joke is like he's looking for that eighth grader in the middle school pickup game who's going to be really good, right? What if Sam Presti has all these picks built up, just waiting for something like this to happen, and he shifts some of these picks off to Kevin Durant and to get Kevin Durant in a trade with the Brooklyn Nets? And could you imagine if OKC gets Kevin Durant and he goes back there and he fully embraces it, maybe possibly wins a championship there? I mean, that would have to do a lot to his legacy. That would add a significant
It's a
chunk
LeBron
to his
story, but let me ask you something, right? And Noah, same question for you. What players are they going to trade? Lou Dort?
That's what I was.
Is it Lou Dort? It's Lou Dort, Trey Mann, and I mean, shoot, give me.
I mean, if you're getting Kevin
concern.
Durant, if you're getting Kevin Durant, do you ship away SGA or Shet? If you're doing that,
I wouldn't. I'm
Yeah,
not going to compromise the future of my franchise to get Kevin Durant back. I like the Shea, Giddey, Chet kind of trio too much to go, all right, I'm going to give you one of these guys plus all these picks plus a couple other players. I wouldn't do that personally.
The concern with OKC was always which players they'd be able to sort of lure Brooklyn into, because again, I kind of second Ryan's sentiment there that I wouldn't want to give up Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Holmgren, or Giddey. I mean, you might want to ship off one of them if Brooklyn's considering that potentially for as many draft picks as they have locked and loaded, but they are not going to want to empty those three core pieces as it seems right now for Durant to go back there. And just by the way, you mentioned, Jake, earlier that just looking at his contract, right, and how many years he has left, that he wouldn't be a rental at whatever place he ends up in post Brooklyn. But just looking at how his career has unfolded, he hasn't been, at least past OKC in his time there, from that point, he hasn't been the kind of guy that you can build around. He's been the guy that you add to a team that's either just about ready or it just needs that one last piece to push them over the top. And I think that's why when you look at him going back to OKC and sort of that kind of return narrative here, OKC is not anywhere near that sort of level right now with the roster they have. And considering how much, we're already sort of projecting they'll have to give up for him, I don't think that's a plausible option, or at least a good situation for him considering where he's at in his career. Like he has got to be a guy that teams add, like contenders add, and not like they're not going to reset with him as the centerpiece of that franchise. That is long gone at this point.
Jake, hold on really quick before you go, right? There's an agreement to what you're saying earlier. Like, obviously I jumped right in and said, what players are they going to trade for? And I do agree with you. Like, OKC on paper, they've got a package that they can give, and it doesn't not make sense. And the narrative is dope, right? To have that idea of, okay, well, KD goes back and has a LeBron-esque arc and wins a chip in OKC. So I honestly love it. I honestly prefer that. If I'm being honest, like I'd love for Durant to go back to OKC. But when you look at this roster that they have, can you guys tell me who the highest player is on Oklahoma City right now?
Is it Lou Dort?
It's about to be Lou Dort, but right now it's Derek Favors. And you know how much money Derek Favors is making a year?
15.
9.
Oh, I thought he was making 15.
He's making $9 million a year. So they're going to have to trade probably Favors to make the salary work. Probably JaMychal Green, who's making $8 million a year. So there's your two guys that aren't that good and aren't making a lot of money. And then it's probably Lou Dort, and then maybe Theo Maledon, who's a rookie, hasn't done much. You might get Darius Baisley, a power forward, out of it. You maybe see a guy like Ty Jerome, who's been a consistent mover across.
Brooklyn doesn't want them, man.
They don't want them.
They don't want them.
That's the biggest thing. Is like they've got to trade so many quote unquote bums, if you will, guys that just are low level NBA role players at this point in their careers. And maybe the best piece that they could get is probably one of the Jalen Williamses, either the one from Santa Clara or the one from Arkansas. And right now, Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara has played really well so far in the summer league. And I think that'd be a guy that you'd probably get. He's a rookie this year. You'd get him out of this class. There's just so many different players that you'd have to add in just to meet Durant's salary, to make the salaries work, then all the trades. And they're guys that I don't think Brooklyn's going to want. It's an awesome pipe dream. And it's one that I think in theory really could work. That is Kevin Durant to Oklahoma City. I just think there's so many factors going against it that it's just like, I think his three main spots are Phoenix and Miami, like you mentioned. And then, as you've mentioned a bunch to us over the last couple of weeks over the last week or ago, since he formally announced the request, Boston. You look at that Malcolm Brogdon trade, it fits the salary version of it. I don't see it, but I'm certain there are people out there that do see Boston as a viable option.
I just think if you look at all three of those teams, it's just where does that legacy come out? Because if he goes to a Phoenix or Miami, we thought Phoenix was the best team in the league. We thought they were going to make the finals. We thought that they were in. They steamrolled through the regular season. And Miami, again, first seed in the Eastern Conference. How much of his legacy would get killed just by going to the first seed in each of the respective conferences? That's a legacy killer.
It's just
and if he doesn't care, that's fine. That's totally fine if he doesn't care. And that's
It's reinforcing his legacy, though.
He's
That
still
is
a
his
Hall of Famer.
legacy.
I'm just saying, okay, yeah, you're right. No, it does fit his legacy, jumping ship when, crap hits the fan, right? But however, if I guess when we're talking about legacy, I'm talking about I can't see him cracking the top 10 if he goes to a Phoenix, Miami, even Boston.
If he wins
I
two,
can't
three
see it.
chips, if he wins 2-3 chips in the next 4 years, then
No.
maybe.
Because people already discount those Warriors rings. It's going to be like, winning a championship in the NBA is hard, right? But
everyone discounts everybody in the top 10, though. The only guy who doesn't get any slack in the top 10 is probably Shaq, because everyone loves Shaq because he's a funny dude. There are people who hate on Michael Jordan. Skip Bayless, the biggest troll alive, says LeBron James isn't a top 10 player of all time, when in fact he's guaranteed top 2 and borderline 1, right? And that's an argument for a different day. But you're always going to get clowned for different reasons. I don't know. I think if KD goes to one of these contenders, whether it be Boston, whether it be Miami, whether it be Philadelphia, whether it be Phoenix, whether it be Golden State again, I don't really care. And he wins 2 or 3 chips. Yeah, of course.
Golden State again.
I don't care where he goes as long as I get to see a really good basketball player compete on a really good team and win a couple more rings and make a case to be one of the most decorated, most talented individuals to ever play the game on 94 feet of hardwood. Right?
I think he's going to be borderline, by the way. I think it's not guaranteed that if he wins 2 rings in the next 4 or 5 years that he's like slotted in as like an unquestioned, undisputed top 10 player in the league all time. But just winning championships, I think while they may be discounted because of how they're won,
still chips.
They're still championships. But here's the thing. I agree with both sides of it. There's still value to winning championships because it's regardless of who you're playing with, it's still so hard to win in this league and get over that hump as the final team standing at the end of the year, right? But at the same time, it's still going to be discounted if he goes to a place like Phoenix, Boston, Golden State, whatnot. One of the top teams. It's still going to be. I'm not going to like measure what its actual value is, like what the actual discounted sort of what it drops to from 4 championships to 2 or whatever. But it's still not going to like put him in full on because he won a couple more championships in the same way those first 2 came. You know what I mean?
He's like top 20.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
I think he's locked in at top 20. I'm just saying.
I think he might be top 15 right now.
When you start looking at this top 10 list, everybody in that top 10, you say, okay, he did it on his own. He did it on his own. He won. Kevin Durant has never done it on his own. He couldn't do it in OKC. He jumped ship, won 2 rings with Golden State when they already won before him and now have won after him. So what does that mean? And then he goes to build his own thing in Brooklyn and the thing implodes on itself.
Did everybody do it on their own? I mean, I can go down the line. I mean, yeah, Scottie Pippen's not the same player individually that Steph Curry.
Pippen's not top 10. You don't.
No,
but it's also top 10 list. Come on.
I'm just making this debate right now that Scottie Pippen is arguably, and respect to Scottie Pippen, he's arguably the greatest sidekick in the history of the association, right? LeBron James certainly didn't do it on his own. He left, and he was the original Kevin Durant, if you will. Kareem had Magic. Magic had Kareem. Bird kind of had others here and there. You can't discredit Kevin McHale.
Kareem won without Magic. Magic won after post Kareem was in his prime. LeBron, yeah, he went to Miami. LeBron went back and won 2 more in Cleveland and LA. Jordan did it on his own. Okay, Scottie Pippen, sure, but Jordan was the facilitator there. It was his team.
Well, yeah.
Go
LeBron
down that list.
Bird
did it on his own.
Kevin Love in Cleveland, bro. What do you
Kevin
mean?
Love was not Minnesota Kevin Love.
And you can't
the
tell
year
me
they won it, he was not that good.
Wasn't a dog, bro.
Oh, he was a dog. Of course, you got to have a sidekick. But I'm telling you that if you look at all those teams, that was LeBron's team. That was Jordan's team. That was Duncan's team. Like, come on.
Let me get in here. Let me get in here.
And you can't tell me. Sorry, real quick. You can't tell me that that the year that it was Steph's team. I'm sorry, but Kevin Durant was like phenomenal during his time in Golden State. He was arguably the number 1 option. Yes, Steph was, but you could make the argument that he was. I'm just saying. Go ahead.
So I have a question, right? I'm going to start here. Durant. The question I have for you guys with Durant is that do you think there's a reason why he's the one joining other guys like Steph, right, in a place like Golden State instead of the other way around? I mean, I think that needs to be noted because the distinction in my mind between MJ's situation, picking up those sort of the Scottie Pippens, the Horace Grants, think those kinds of players that really played and fitted that sort of Chicago Bulls play style well, that ultimately led to championships. Okay. It still is basically Jordan staying in place, being the centerpiece of that franchise and having that franchise build around him. Okay.
He went to the Wizards.
But then he really pulled LeBron, right? He goes to Blazers' hometown team.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Noah. Go ahead.
I just think that it's different. It's different when you're talking about just overall, like, did everyone do it without help? Obviously, everyone had some level of help when you're talking about the all-time greats. Okay, you that's understandable, but it's still different because Durant went to join as opposed to having other players gravitate towards him as the main guy in a certain place. And I don't think that he necessarily had to go that route. I think he was in a good spot in OKC. They had their problems, okay, but they were so close. They were on the verge of going to.
They blew a 3-1 lead to Golden State.
Yeah, well,
he got scared. He got scared that was the best he was going to do, and to an extent, I respect that. This man understood that he might not have been able to do it in OKC, and he valued one thing over. Kevin Durant could have stayed in Oklahoma City for 10 more years. He could have averaged 30. He could have been best buddies with Russell Westbrook. And you know what? They might have made it to an NBA Finals. They might have won a chip. He didn't think that was the best option for him to win championships. When did we stop discrediting people for trying to go out and win titles? Yeah, he didn't maybe do it the right way, but he did it in a way that guaranteed he had his best opportunity to put a ring on this finger and a ring on this finger and a ring on this finger, right? Like, he tried his best to make sure he could win chips, and he didn't care what anybody thought of that. And there's, to an extent, I have a lot of respect for that.
I get that, but if we're talking about comparing legacies, because we're the conversation was sort of how he gets into the top 10, based on
what his legacy
a couple more championships, right? These next.
Does he get into the top 10
next half decade.
Chips in Brooklyn though?
Yeah, that was his own thing. He built that.
He built
Kyrie teamed up for that.
That
was all him.
Up for that. I mean,
Kyrie
was that Kai's idea?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It might have been Kai's idea. We saw that in the All-Star game a couple of years ago. I think it was 2019. I think it was 2018, whatever the year it was. But my point is, with that Brooklyn Nets thing, right, is that it was Kevin Durant's team. We all know that. We all acknowledge that. It was KD's show. Brooklyn was KD, and KD was Brooklyn.
That's fair.
OKC was KD. Golden State was Steph Curry. Regardless of how much better KD performed, and we've seen this at other times. The best player on the team isn't always the guy. It's not always his team. When you think back to the Celtics team in 2008, it was Paul Pierce's team. Garnett was the best player on that team. Go back even down the line earlier. You can make an argument that it was Wade's team. Shaq played a really big role in that. Now, not probably to the same extent as Wade did, to an extent like that, but Shaq was right there next to him, right? And we can go on down the line, right? My point is, to get to be in that top 10, it's almost an unwritten requirement that you did it being the guy. It was your team. You were the main guy. If it didn't work, it was on you. When it worked, it's on you. Kevin Durant does not get that benefit of being, he won 2 in Golden State. That's wonderful. What have you done for me now? What are you doing now? Have you won on your own? Did you go do your own thing? No, it failed. Then that should be held against them.
Well, I mean, when we're talking about top 10, this is where my head's at, guys. So we just sort of talked about how Steph, he's now top 10. I'm not sure. Are we sort of all in agreement that he is now part of that sort of top 10 list after this past season? I think he is.
Absolutely.
But regardless, right?
Not. That's almost. He's closer to being there than he is closer to being not in there, right? So he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to clarify that, but so adding that new player to the list now, okay? Why can't we just sort of look at the distinctions between Steph and a Durant 3-4 years from now with an extra championship or two. I'm just saying that with Steph, right? He had Durant, but he didn't go and join him. He had him come and join Golden State, his franchise. I think there's something to be said about that, because it speaks to sort of the appeal of the culture that had been established in Golden State through Stephen Curry, and then sort of the secondary pieces alongside him with Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. I just think that is not unimportant when you're looking at trying to compare those kinds of players when it's like so close in terms of talent level, because we're thinking about Kevin Durant. I think you are, at least, Ryan, he is at the very least a top 10 talent all time. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's a top 10 player. Like when you think of Durant, he has whatever, top 5. Okay, right. So he has that.
I know where you're going.
Right. He has that sort of draw, you know what I mean? Just based off his skill set, what he brings to the table as an elite scorer, one of the best that we've seen in the NBA and the association. But when you're looking at trying to put him in the top 10 list, comparing him to other players is a must. And so just the easiest way to do that right now, considering a new player just entered that sort of atmosphere, I think there's that distinguishment between Steph staying in place, right, sticking to the franchise and believing in sort of the process. And by the way, he had to stay there for a couple of years in limbo, right, while Golden State continued to build up to this recent run. Okay, I think that is just as, if not more, admirable than the kind of respect that you signaled for Durant wanting to go out and win championships. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think
so.
My only real rebuttal to that, right, is that I think the argument is not yet there to make KD a top 10 player.
Mm-hmm.
I think the argument won't be there immediately. If he goes anywhere to another contender and wins 2 rings, when he retires, there will be dismissers. There will be people that say he's not top 10. I think when we look back at it in 30 years, though, and you say, okay, yeah, well, Kevin Durant played for Oklahoma City, and then he went to Golden State, formed the super dynasty, and it was a big controversy. Then he went to Brooklyn and tried to form another super dynasty that was his own, and he didn't do a good job of it. And then he went somewhere else and won 2 more rings, right? People will, in 30 years, when you're looking at it with less recency bias and a little less emotion, I think if he wins 2 more rings, I don't think he'll be deniable. He'll be someone that you'll look back and go, man, that guy spent an entire 18 years in the NBA averaging 27, 8, and 4. And he won 5 rings or whatever. He was an all-star for 15, 16 times. You know what I mean? Like,
mm-hmm.
Maybe not immediately, but when you throw out that near sight bias and that recency bias, and in 30 years when Noah's old and Jake's old and I'm old, it's going to be like, man, Kevin Durant was really good when I was 15, really good when I was 20. That man was one of the 10 best to ever do it. That's, I think, where I want to make my argument. If he goes and wins 2 more, regardless of if it's in Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons, because people forget that team is still really good, or it's in Phoenix with Devin Booker and the end of Chris Paul and whoever comes after CP3, or in Miami with Jimmy Buckets, or in Philadelphia. Shoot, I keep seeing that as a potential option, that Daryl Morey just goes, oh, you know what, we can try. Let's see. Or in Boston with Tatum, right? Whether he wins 2 more wherever he goes, I think in 30 years we'll go, yeah, Kevin Durant was pretty good. He's probably top 10. That's my case, at least.
Yeah, and I think, kind of,
go ahead,
I just think the biggest thing with being in the top 10 is your storyline, right? And when your storyline sucks, you can't be in the top 10. It's part of your legacy. It's part of your narrative.
Story. It's a great
What's
story.
the story?
He went
I couldn't do it on my own. I couldn't do it on my own in OKC. So I jumped ship to a really good team, won 2 more, and then failed repeatedly.
It was a really good team.
That's a great story. Yeah. That's a great ending.
But it ends in a W. Sorry, go ahead, Noah.
To Ryan's point now, because we kind of clashed a little bit. But to your point here, okay, it's an era. Now, whether you want to say Durant sort of like took it to a whole nother level as far as the building super teams, right? You can say that. But I still think that everything from that point now, right? After that whole sort of culture across the league was established, going and joining other guys is the most, it's a reasonable option. That's why I think when you look at Damian Lillard in Portland, right? It's admirable, but at the same
He
time,
didn't run from the grind, bro. He didn't run from the grind.
he didn't run from the grind, but it's not impossible, but it's super unlikely for him to compete at the highest level in the league, team wise, for championship, for conference finals appearance, without having other guys join him or going to join other good, really good players in another place. So in that respect, it's not like it doesn't make sense as to why Durant has sort of done what he's done with going and joining other guys, making his career sort of putting him in the best position to win. Okay.
Are we
because
gonna remember?
It's in an era.
Are we gonna remember Dame as much as we're gonna remember? I mean, we're gonna remember Dame as much as we're gonna remember someone who maybe I can't think of someone who won a ring, just one ring, that was a solid contributor in the year that he won a ring. But I'm scared that no one's gonna I'm scared Dame Lillard's gonna become like George the Iceman Gervin, right?
Okay.
Where
Good
it's
take,
like,
yeah.
That's a good one.
Show.
That's a good
it's
one,
like,
dude.
shoot, my 58-year-old dad goes, "Oh my God, Iceman Gervin was the best player I ever saw," and I go,
My grandpa. Same
"Yeah,
shit.
but yeah, exactly." But then I say, "But he didn't. He's Iceman. Yeah, I'm sure he was great, but I don't care." I think that's what we're gonna remember Dame as, because he credit again. It's the opposite as Katie, right? Credit to him. He stayed. He wanted to do it there. He still does, even after all that's happened this past year alone in Portland and CJ leaving and all that. Credit to him. But I'm going to be in the.
How far does that credit go?
My
right?
two kids are only going to hear about Damian Lillard from me, bro. They're not going to go to their friends and have lunch in 5th grade and talk about how Damian Lillard is so underrated. And let me tell you, George Iceman Gervin is underrated. And Damian Lillard will be underrated in 25 years, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day. I would rather have a career of Kevin Durant sliding around everywhere than I would of Damian Lillard. Shoot, I'd rather have Kevin Durant's career than probably Scottie Pippen, than probably Dwayne Wade even, right? I mean, that's controversial, but I'd rather have KD than Dwayne Wade.
In this era, I think it's reasonable to say that you have that preference, because it's in a time when super teams are so prevalent, and in order to compete towards the top, I think you saw that less so this past year, just by the way, because you had a team like Golden State and Boston, which were kind of built from the ground up, at least with the core pieces that they had to get where they were in the NBA Finals. But I think, right, exactly. I think it's huge for the league in that respect to have that kind of finals matchup. But
for the people who care about the league, it was huge. For the league struggled, I think, outside the people who cared about the league, but that's another story, right?
I think when you're looking at just before that, or just generally during this period when there's been super teams forming left and right, in order to really put yourself in the best position to compete, you need to play the game. And that has been the game more or less for Durant towards the sort of second half of his career post OKC. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I got nothing else. Jake, take it. But
I just think the final thing is, and I mean, just not to repeat myself, but when your story sucks, can't be in the top 10. As simple as it puts. Like, if you compare everybody's story and everybody's legacy and narratives to Kevin Durant's, who currently are in the top 10, there's nobody I'd rather pick over Kevin Durant. I wouldn't pick Kevin Durant over anybody in that top 10.
Would you rather have KG or Kevin Durant? You're
tough.
biased, so you can be biased. That's fine.
It's not even that, because I consider KG was so good in Minnesota. That guy was a dog in Minnesota.
But what didn't he do in Minnesota?
Yeah, he didn't win.
Yeah,
but he didn't jump ship.
That's fair. But would you personally pick KG or KD?
I'd pick KD because he's so talented, and he's been talented for so long.
Okay.
It's hard not to say it.
I agree.
If I was building a team and I was building a culture, I'd pick KG any day of the week.
That question, by the way, just kind of points out that Durant even if he's not in the top 10, dude, he is going to be
really good,
really close and considered to be one of the all-time greats. Like, you don't
He's
have
gonna
to
be-
be top. You don't have to be top 10 all-time to be considered one of the all-time greats. Like, he will be that once he leaves this game.
people talk about Scottie Pippen every day, man, and he's probably 30 to 35.
Top 50 at the very least, I'd say.
Like he might maybe just scrape the 40s, but like people talk about Scottie Pippen every day. That's all I got. Jake?
I mean, who knows? Maybe in the next couple of years, KD's story will get a little bit better and he can win a championship on his own and be that guy, his team, everything about him. But until that happens, let's hold off on the top 10 talk. Until next time, this has been for Tato and Seymour. We'll catch you guys next week. Talk about the NFL next week. Big trades going on in the NFL. We'll touch on that later.